Okay, let's hear about Namibia, ICT and computer and teaching.
What do you want to know?
How teachers to use computer and other community technology in Namibia?
Well, it actually depends on where in the country one is teaching. Some schools are well equipped with technology, for example, having computer labs, computer laboratories with computers and so on. Others, you'd find a place where there isn't even electricity, so you can't even have computer lab because there isn't even the power to connect them or to make them work. So it pretty much depends on which part of the country it is. So I would say the majority of the country, maybe about 70%, doesn't really have the possibility of using technology because of these limitations.
Okay, there's public schools and private schools. Is it between?
There's a big difference. There's a huge difference. Private schools usually, that's where children of rich parents go, and therefore these schools are able to generate a lot of funding and a lot of revenue to have sufficient facilities, including ICTs and educational technologies. But government schools, there is even a shortage of textbooks in government schools. So there's a huge differences between private and public schools.
Do the students get enough skills to use computers and ICT?
I would say it's a new developing thing in Namibia. We didn't even have a computer literacy or ICT literacy curriculum until 2 years ago. So they just introduced a new curriculum now, which sort of enables all learners from grade 1 to grade 12 to obtain ICT skills. So I would say ICT skills is quickly going up, but it also depends on the generation of the child. Children of today are much more skillful or have better ICT literacy skills because they get introduced to technology early, like owning cell phones or playing around with cell phones of parents and so on. So it is a new thing, and the spread of the literacy amongst students is still very limited.
So you have been noticed some problems. What we can do?
What I've noticed is a sort of a debate going on in the country at the moment is there are stakeholders like people, experts in the field of ICT and technology, and there is authorities like the ministry. What happens is that a few years ago there was a program called SchoolNet which provided free computers to schools, but this program was based on free software like Linux, and which enables the sharing of open educational resources and so on. But recently, because of funding, which is usually coming with strings attached, the government has adopted Microsoft-based systems, and that's like the ongoing debate which is going on at the moment. So when it comes to the solutions to the problem, I think basically what Namibia needs is to opt for cheaper and especially free software-based equipment so that it will be easier to distribute to a wider population because it's cheaper, and also because it's easier to share. For example, if a teacher who is doing well in a particular school produces certain teaching materials, they can easily share it with another teacher because it's open-based.
In Namibia, there is a governmental policy about using ICT in schools. What about in practice?
Well, of course, Namibia is well known for having fantastic policies on paper, but there's a huge disparity between what's on paper and what's going on in practice. For example, we were the first country in Africa to actually come up with an ICT policy for education, but most of the issues which have been addressed in the policy to be implemented, which was implemented in 2005, we are still lagging behind in terms of how to implement. So I would say that a few schools in urban centers, like in towns, are sort of going in line with the strategy, but most schools are still behind in terms of even having these resources in their schools, let alone teaching teachers how to use them and then teaching learners how to be literate so they can use them as well.
So what about situation, for example, comprehensive school and universities?
That's an interesting question. I have observed the situation, for example, at Teachers College, where students are coming from high school and coming to a tertiary institution. Most of them come without any computer literacy skills. So it's almost like most of them some actually come to encounter computers in more detail, like to be able to engage with it more at university level. So I would say there's a huge, there's a lot to be done between, especially at school level, so that universities don't spend too much time teaching students how to be literate, and so that they can concentrate on teaching students how to use technology in their learning rather than to teach them how to be literate first and then let them use technology in their learning.
Okay, what about internet? Is it access?
Internet access, that's a huge problem. Like I mentioned, for example, electricity provision to especially rural areas is still limited, and that goes along with telephone lines as well. And because of these limitations, very few schools have access to internet. And the internet in Namibia is also very expensive. So most schools I know, for example, in remote areas which have internet, would only be limited in terms of use, be used by the principal and maybe the secretary, like administrative purposes. But to make it widely available to teachers and learners in classrooms, it's a huge challenge because it's expensive. In some places there isn't even access to such technologies. But I would say actually the future for Namibia and for probably most African countries is to go mobile, because mobile network is widely accessed compared to landline telephones. So perhaps our best guess or opportunities to actually make use of mobile technology so that we can access internet through cell phones. So that could be an area which is worth investigating and see how we can probably incorporate or integrate mobile phones into teaching as opposed to computers, which are more expensive and more costly and therefore out of reach for most of the population.
What about these computers? Are they enough? You can use that. They are so old, for example.
Yeah, the situation has been in some schools that schools actually get like what we call waste dumping. There's a nice term for that which I can't remember, whereby like a company which has bought new computer software or machines, they get rid of their old tools or machines by donating them to a school. And so most of the computer labs in schools have been sort of developed in that way, by getting computers which are being donated either from NGOs from abroad or from companies locally, and therefore you have this differences between you go to a school and there's a range of machinery. Some are latest, some are old, some are beyond repair, and so on. So I think that's another challenge as well. And there's we can't even think of this idea of one-to-one where you have like one PC per child, which is not important in my view when you think of collaborative learning. I mean, students can still work on one PC in a group and so on. So in terms of the number and also the types of machines we have, it's still a challenge as well.
So how have you been used ICT in your work?
Okay, I would say in terms of usage when it comes to teachers, most of the usage is more in teaching rather than to facilitate learning. For example, most teachers are taking this ICT literacy course called ICDL. I think it's called ECDL in Europe, whereby they learn how to make use of Windows-based software like Word, spreadsheets, and PowerPoint, especially PowerPoint. So a lot of teachers learn how to use technology to present and deliver lessons, but there isn't much going on in terms of how to make use of technology to facilitate learning. In other words, to let learners use technology to learn on their own or to find information and so on. Partly also because it's understandable because there's lack of computers. So if you have one computer, it better be used by the teacher. But it doesn't take away the teacher-centered method. You just replace the chalkboard with a screen and a projector, but the teaching method stays the same. So I think because of that, at the moment, most of the ICT integration is actually just making use of ICT, but still making use of the same method because teachers are mainly using it to present lessons, but not really to facilitate learning. Yeah.
Okay, that was interesting. Do you have something else what you want to say?
I would say technology has a future in Namibia as well as possibly in many developing nations, but I think a lot of research needs to be done to see which models will work. I think most of the time we get ideas from the north or from the west which are copied and pasted, and they would not work because the contexts are different. For example, mobile technology is becoming more highly accessible in Africa than computers. And I have read a report a few days ago that in terms of accessibility to internet, mobile technology has overtaken PC. In other words, which devices do people use to connect to the internet? Mobile technology has overtaken PCs in Nigeria, and I'm sure it will be close to similar in Namibia. So possibly that is the direction which we should think about, maybe research and see how can we pedagogically use mobile technology in our teaching and learning.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.